Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of a brand new podcast that we're all super excited about. The podcast is called The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis. My name is Dr. John Dehlin. I'm currently accompanied next to me by my brilliant wife,
Margi. Hi, everyone.
And we are also joined remotely live from Wichita, Kansas, with the amazing Natasha Helfer Parker, sex therapist, marriage and family therapist, and all-around amazing human being. Natasha,
Woo!
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks. Hang out with you guys, get a self-esteem boost. That's awesome.
Yeah. Some of you will know I have a PhD in clinical and counseling psychology. I run a podcast called Mormon Stories Podcast, and I've been doing faith crisis work for 1 to 2 decades, depending how you count. But my psychology PhD is focused on supporting people through a faith transition. Margi, tell us just quickly about yourself.
Sure. So I recently certified as a certified life coach through Life Purpose Institute. And I specialize in matters pertaining to life transitions. So how it impacts things like identity or grief or relationships. So that's kind of where I love to sort of plant ideas, talk with coaching clients. That's what I do.
It's good to have you, sweetie.
Thanks, babe.
I love you. And Natasha, I introduced you, but anything else you want to say about you?
I have a master's in marriage and family therapy. I've been working for over 20 years, primarily with a Mormon clientele all over the spectrum of belief. So from traditional believers to post-Mormons. Love working with faith transitions, love working with issues of sexuality. There's a lot of interplay between those two for sure. And just excited to be here because this is kind of at the crux of all the work that I'm about.
All right. Well, we are always, I'm so excited to kick this off with you guys. And let's go ahead and jump to just a little bit of a description of kind of what our mission is. Margi came up with this mission, but I really like it. And basically the way we've narrowed it down is that our mission is to provide positive, practical, and personal tips for navigating a Mormon faith crisis or transition. I like all that: positive, practical, and personal. And our tagline or our message is that a faith crisis is going to be painful, it's going to be difficult, but it can be a huge gift to your life. It can be the best thing that ever happened to you, I believe. And our goal is to help people through a podcast, a blog, eventually a book, to guide people through that process. And if we do 50 or 100 episodes of the podcast plus a book, we really think that we're going to help people. Anything you want to add, Margi?
Nope. You did a great job.
Natasha?
I would just say that, for many people, they're in a faith transition while in partnership with somebody who is not, so like a mixed faith relationship or marriage, and that our belief is that it can be a gift for both people, even though, again, it may not feel like it to the person who isn't transitioning. And yet the opportunity of growth and vulnerability and intimacy is really there. And we're going to go into a lot of that. So I just want to make sure that that's heard by not just people who are in the middle of the transitions themselves, but those who love and support them.
That's so important.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Super good. Okay, so we're always going to start with some announcements, and there are just a couple things we want to make sure people are aware of. The first is that you can expect this podcast to come out weekly, once a week. Usually it will be all three of us. There may be times where one of us or both of us aren't able to make it, but our goal is for all three of us to always record an episode every week. So look for that. We're always going to try and live stream it on Facebook. We really want to live stream it on Facebook because we like the interactive element. We like people being able to chime in, add experiences, add questions, and we want it to be interactive. So we will live stream it. We want to let everybody know that in addition to a podcast, each of us we do have private practices as coaches. So my website's johndehlin.com. Margi's is
beautyinthenow.org.
beautyinthenow.org.
Mm-hmm.
And Natasha, what is your personal coaching page?
NatashaParker.org is where you can find everything I do and I'm involved with.
And we want to make sure people know that in addition to our podcast, we are available to support people in their marriages and their faith crisis, as it relates to a faith crisis. We're not talking about a therapeutic context when we talk about the coaching that we do, even though I have a PhD in psychology, Natasha is a licensed therapist, etc. In this context, we're talking about coaching. We want to develop a community, so we want to find a way to help you guys support each other, and we'll be talking about that in the weeks and months ahead, but that's our goal. We do plan on doing faith crisis workshops and retreats in the coming year in 2019. So look for us to be advertising that and talking more about that. Our website is mormonfaithcrisis.org or .com. And if you went to mormonfaithcrisis.com/events, that's where you'll be able to see our events page. So stay tuned about events. And then ultimately, we may develop some web courses that we share with you guys. So look for us to talk about that in the weeks and months ahead. Those will be deep dives into really, really important issues like marriage and sexuality and navigating faith crisis. There'll be more sort of premium content than what you'd get on a weekly blog or podcast. So we'll talk more about that. But then finally, we really want your support and participation. We want you to email us with ideas at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com. We want you to make posts to our blog. We want you to make comments on our Facebook page. We really, really want this to be user or, listener or viewer driven. So if you have topics you want us to cover, if you like or don't like certain elements, if you have ideas for what we can do to help you, we really want your feedback. So that's all the announcements.
Brilliant.
Let's dive into the segment called What's Working. This segment is an idea of Margi's, where each week we just begin by sharing something that's working in our lives that maybe you guys could benefit from as well. And Margi, I'd like you to begin with your What's Working moment.
Okay, well, so sometimes things that are working are large things, and sometimes it's in the little things. And today I'm sharing some seemingly small comforts, but they're making a difference to me lately. I think it's like 20 degrees outside currently. So for real, it's my heating pad. Okay, warm. And I'm actually going to do this. Hold on. My cozy socks. I mean, check that out. And I love this because I can write with this. I can record a podcast with this. It's like a little partner in life, a little cozy that comes along and treats me like a human.
Your cozy socks.
So yeah, my cozy socks.
Make you feel good.
And my heating pad. It's the small things right now for me.
They just provide you comfort.
Yeah, it's comfort, and it's in a way kind of showing up for myself. There are things that need to be done that I can't get away from and that I truly love and enjoy doing. But it also adds just a bit of presence. Like you can tell, like I'm a sensing person, like how things feel and smell. And so there you go. That's my What's Working.
And Natasha's trying to hold back her laughter.
It's appreciation, right, Natasha?
Why are you laughing?
I love Margi's ideas. I love these things that are so important and that people don't think of as, I think they are big things actually, to take care of the little things.
Self-care is a big thing. I love it. Natasha, What's working for you this week?
Okay, so what's working for me this week, and I love how this is turning into a show and tell.
Yes, look at you.
Wait, show us again.
So I love to knit. This is a little scarf I'm making, and I have, so this is two needs that this comes into, because on every Monday night I go to knitting club, which is really just one other friend and myself. It's just we can't find anybody else to knit with us. It's a very exclusive club, but it takes care of a social need for me to connect with somebody outside of my family unit. And especially having gone through, also faith stuff, sometimes you feel like you lose some of your community that you're used to. So finding new friends or new opportunities or new things like that has been very helpful. And then just the knitting itself is very kind of just mind numbing therapy for me. And so that's very helpful. And it can be really easy to not take the time to prioritize some of that. Like I could think of 500 other things I should be doing rather than knitting this scarf. And yet the time I do this helps me have more energy and gasoline for other things I need to be doing as well.
Love it.
Love that.
All right. Knitting. My what's working for this week is daddy-child dates. So I have 4 late teenage or early adult children, and I have been listening to Margi and Shafali Sayberry, which is an author we'll talk about a lot when we talk about parenting. And they've made this point that emotional connection is the most important element of parenting, more important than rules, of structure, of control, of punishment, all that stuff. It's all about emotional connection. And I tend to be really busy. So I told my kids, each of my 4 kids, you get one daddy-child date a month where you can do whatever you want. We can go to a jazz game. We can go to a theater event. We can go skiing. We can go to a movie. We can just sit home, pop popcorn. We can go on a walk. We can go on a hike. I don't care what it is. And so every week I'm having at least one daddy-child date. I've gone snowboarding now with Anna, Winston, and Clara. I go to movies with my kids.
You took Maya to a jazz game.
I took my daughter Maya, to a jazz game recently. Went on a big walk with Anna on a hike on Sunday, I think it was. And it's helping in my relationship with my kids. It's building a bond. It's making them want to confide in me. It's making us feel better about our relationship. And it's helping me be a better parent and a better human because I'm learning a lot from my kids. So that's my moment.
True.
Really quickly, shout out to Angela, who's joined us, Evan and Lacey. Lacey writes, OMG, I need those socks. So Margi, she loves your socks. Thanks, Lacey. Evan writes, yay for retreats. So Evan is excited that we're going to be doing our workshops and retreats. So thanks, Evan. We're excited about those as well. And we just a shout out to everyone who's joining us on Facebook. Okay, so what we're going to do with each podcast episode is we're going to cover a topic. And that's going to let people just jump to the topic that they care about. And I chose kind of an odd one because I could have chose mixed faith marriage or raising kids or whatever for our first topic. But I chose making peace with Mormonism. And I think that may not be intuitive for a lot of people, especially if you're angry or frustrated in that phase of anger at the church or turmoil or distress. It probably makes no sense to advance this idea that it's important to make peace with Mormonism. And we're gonna number one, make the case for why it's important to reflect on why we're grateful for our Mormon past and to make peace with it. We're gonna talk about that. And then we're gonna talk about ways that we're grateful for our Mormon past. And that's gonna be our first episode. Remember, our motto is positive, practical, and personal tips and tools. And so we want to start with the positive.
Yeah.
And again, that may be off-putting for many people, but if you bear with us and trust us over the next year or two, I think you'll see why that's wise and important.
Yeah, and just to insert the practical, I was just thinking a couple ways to sort of apply what we're doing today would be, if you want to do it kind of on your own, you could do a writing exercise, right? Where you kind of go through the things you're grateful for, so that's one option you have. And if you kind of wanted to, if you have someone that you trust or who is really kind of there for you, you could do it with a person.
That's
where
a great
you
idea.
actually could sit down with someone. It could be a spouse or a close friend, and you could actually have this kind of exercise in person with someone where you're both sharing and kind of talking about, can be really, really helpful.
So we'll circle back to that at the end once we've kind of taken you through the process, but I really like that.
Okay.
Okay, so the first part of this, we're going to go in reverse now. We're going to explore the idea of why why we believe that it's important to make peace with Mormonism and to even be grateful for it when people are either mad at it and or leaving it, potentially leaving it. At a minimum, we're going to be, you're going to be changing your relationship with the church. Worst case, and a very common case, is to leave the church altogether. This podcast is for everyone, both people staying in the church and leaving it. It's for progressive and liberal Mormons as much as it is for post-Mormons. But regardless, we're going to make the argument that it's important to make peace with them. And so each of us has a few bullet points for why we think it's important to make peace with Mormonism, whether or not you leave it. And so I'll give a few of my points, and then Natasha will have you give some, and then Margi will have you give some, and then we'll actually go through the gratitude exercise. Is that all right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so my belief of why it's important to make peace with Mormonism is the following. First and foremost, I believe that it's true and accurate that we have so much to be grateful for as Mormons. Now, I'm going to say that from a position of privilege. I know that I'm a white, heterosexual, educated, cisgender, heterosexual, married, middle class or upper middle class male. And so I know that I've got a ton of privilege. And that probably is going to contribute to why I feel so grateful for my Mormonism. But it's still true. So much good for me in my life has come from my associations with Mormonism that I think it's just accurate to say that and to state it and to own it. So what has Mormonism given me? It's given me, well, I'll talk about that later, but number one, I believe so much good has come from it. Number two is, I believe that it's a form of self-acceptance and self-love. One of the biggest problems I think we're going to face as we're transitioning as Mormons is moving from an external source of authority and comfort to an internal source of acceptance and love. And instead of loving and obeying our leaders, instead of seeing the church as the kingdom of God is the church, I believe what Jesus said, even though I don't even know that I identify as Christian, I believe the kingdom of God is within. I believe the power isn't out external anymore. The power is within. The beauty is within. And so for me, I want to love myself and I want to accept myself. But so much of who I am is Mormon or comes from Mormonism. So if I hate Mormonism and yet so much of myself comes from Mormonism or springs out of Mormonism, then I think that's a form of self-hatred. And so I believe it's important to embrace all of me going forward, which includes my Mormon parts. Now, Natasha, does that part resonate with you?
Absolutely. I'm nodding.
Why? Tell us why. Because this is the concept I've heard you talk about.
I guess I'll talk about it more when you turn the topic over to me, but I think that it's I think a big part of healing from wounds is being able to look at not just the pain or the scar, but also the growth and the capabilities that come from those wounds. And so it's just, these concepts feel very Mormon to me. That's kind of what's interesting. And I'll even maybe talk a little bit about my perspectives on that, but it's kind of this, even not to be triggering, but opposition in all things, or we grow from, new experiences, and part of what we do come from is where we're going. And we need to kind of make peace with both the positive and the negative, so yeah, I totally agree.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just this idea, I feel like what you're really talking about is integration, right? This idea that we can have different components to our experiences and to ourselves, and that we truly are most empowered when we are integrated, when all of those things, and that can involve reframing, but integration is an important part of this process for sure.
I love it. Okay, another reason that I think everybody's going to resonate with is just the idea that gratitude is an essential component of mental health, and I would even argue of spirituality. And when we define spirituality, we don't mean necessarily a belief in an afterlife or in a supreme being, although you can still believe that, and some of us do and some of us don't. When I say spirituality, I mean mental health and a connection to something greater. And I think all of us would agree that the wisest, Buddhism, leaders, Brene Brown, Oprah, whoever it is that you revere now as a modern day prophet or wise person, they're all going to say gratitude is a core tool for mental health.
Well, and it's backed by research.
Mm-hmm.
There you go, pulling out research again, Natasha.
So true.
No, it is. And Margie, you're big on gratitude, right?
Mm-hmm. It's actually part of
Yeah.
something we practice.
So gratitude is the next reason. I believe that in a faith crisis, all these holes are going to develop. You're going to lose all these things. You're going to lose a bunch of bad things, but you're also going to lose some good things. And we'll talk about some of the things that we loved, but we can also talk about, we can do an episode on all the things we lost. But going through the exercise of recognizing what you loved about Mormonism helps you identify the things that you need to pay attention to and attend to as you're making a transition to something different. So in other words, if you loved community and now you're lonely and sad, knowing that you loved community about Mormonism can help direct you to focus on building up a community for yourself, once you're transitioning. Or if you are really grateful for the music of Mormonism and the hymns, and now you don't have that in your life, because in your case, maybe you've left the church, it can help you go, whoa, I need music in my life. What are some ways I can get that music in my life? So identifying what you loved helps point you in the direction of what you need to build into your new life. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Any comments on that? Okay. And then the final one I have is I met Margie.
I mean, right? I mean, I hear that. I hear that.
That's a good one.
And I get that.
Yeah. Okay. So those are some of the reasons why I think it's important to make peace with your past, and to make peace with Mormonism. Even if you hate it, even if you're mad at it, I still think it's important to make peace with it. Now we have a quick comment from Allison, a family member who we love. Shout out to Allison. Hi, Allison.
Hey, Allison.
Allison writes, before we transition fully, I made a list of everything that I wanted to look for in a different faith. Allison, you're a genius. You're brilliant.
Yep.
She did that without us even telling her to do it.
Which is what we like, because that's internal.
We love that. So Allison, we love you. Thank you for sharing that. Any other viewers or listeners want to share tips and tricks or perspectives, we welcome it. So thank you, Allison, for sharing that. Okay, Natasha, what do you want to add to the conversation about why it's important to make peace with and be grateful for your Mormonism?
So my thoughts on this didn't really start with Mormon transitions. My thoughts around this idea of gratitude really started working with families that were dealing with whatever type of traumatic family backgrounds, so lots and lots of people come from less than ideal situations, abusive situations, chronic issues that they dealt with in their childhood, and therefore show up to therapy practice wounded, legitimately upset, very very sad and wondering how these things have impacted their whole life. And so, it starts mirroring some of the things I started hearing people and how they talked about the church as they're transitioning. It almost became like this abusive parent or entity that they were having all these difficult feelings towards. So my framing comes from that perspective. And I really believe through my work with people and also the literature that's out there that we can't really transition from entities successfully, whether there are cultures or families going on the trajectory of what I call full, this kind of a development, and the life example. So can jump on you?
Hey, Natasha, sorry, you were breaking up. Can you try that again?
Okay. Can I start with the life goal? Is
Yeah.
that where you heard me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we start off, we start off completely dependent. We're information, our surrounding area. We have to look up to conform in order to, like, that's not 3 and 5 and 6 years old. You have to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to survive. So that's a correct thing for all of us to be doing. And then, of course, as we develop into pre-adolescence, start noticing some cracks. Maybe mom and dad aren't all that they say they are. Maybe we start disagreeing, especially when you start going into full adolescence. And these people and these entities and these authority figures don't seem as ideal as they once did. And so they're lacking and they disappoint us. And we find them hypocritical. And sometimes they actually cause harm. And so we become angry and rebellious. And again, our survival is at stake. So we break out on our own, right? We start breaking out and deciding how we're going to live our own lives. And that's very developmentally appropriate. And we, at that point of time in our early 20s, oftentimes are highly confident that we know a better way. We have very idealistic kind of black and white thinking, and we're going to build our own new organizing structures. And then the next phase of life is recognizing the many ways we are also faltering and don't have all the answers we thought we had. And so we have to come back to a more humble space, face our own failures, realize that we have our own unanswered questions. And even if we decide that we're better off than where we started, it's usually at this point the gratitude and the willingness to look at the complexity of our narrative that gets us to more intellectually mature positions, emotionally mature positions, so that we are not necessarily stuck in this very black and white world.
And I think we've lost Natasha for a second, but yeah, she says not stuck in a black and white world. So it sounds like what Natasha's saying is that it's developmentally healthy to go through these stages of disillusionment and anger and bitterness and frustration, but it ends up in maturity, where you kind of realize that all institutions are imperfect, all people are imperfect, everyone's going to disappoint you. And it's sort of
nuanced thinking,
nuanced, mature, healthy development. I see you're back, Natasha. You cut out.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Internet is really acting up today.
It's okay. We'll call your Cox Cable and we'll get them to move your router upstairs.
Yes.
Look at him.
We will do that. Yeah, so just to finish my point, though, I think people who do best, even when they come from abusive backgrounds, are people that can either feel gratitude for the imperfect parts of their backgrounds that led them to understand themselves or have experiences that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
Yeah.
Or actually develop empathy and gratitude for imperfect people who helped raise them and more than likely did the best that they knew how to do, given their circumstances. So those are the people that tend to have more complex narratives, are able to get past the anger phase, which is a very normal part of the grief phase. So you do want to be angry because that can be very helpful, but you don't want to stay angry, right?
Yeah,
and so
that's right.
That's, I think, where gratitude can really make a difference.
I love it. Anger is a tool, not a destination.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Love it. All right, Margi, why do you think it's important to be grateful for and make peace with your Mormon past?
So one thing that I really think is unique to gratitude is it tends to be very present. So we're kind of in where we're looking at ourselves now, and as opposed to, and part of this process can be grappling with the past quite a bit. And so that's something that's a strength I see. So I look at gratitude sometimes, an analogy, because English lit, can't leave me, is that it's much like a suitcase. And what you're doing is you're kind of going over, it can be beliefs, experiences, relationships. And what you're really doing is you're packing, you're deciding what you want to put in this suitcase for the journey ahead. And I love it because it is internal. It's very much a reflective experience for you. And it's also this shift away from where we've been with a focus more on where we wish to go. And I think that's important because, again, we are considering who we are presently as opposed to who we were in the past, what we care about, what we value. And then this shift as we make this shift toward gratitude, I find it can really make the difference between feeling disempowered and empowered, right? And I think that's something that's kind of crucial to this journey is a feeling of empowerment. So, and I think this is especially important too, because we'll be sifting through emotions that are difficult, right, to process. I think there's pain there can be loss there. And I find in my experiences, and I think it's quite common to the human experience, the things that are sad and painful, we tend to view as negative. We tend to view that which hurts us as a bad thing. Now, we know cognitively, of course, we can have painful experiences that are in fact really good for us, right? We have insights, we grow, but gratitude is kind of this reminder. And I think that's true for me. You'll see in one of the things that I'm grateful for actually was a wound. It was actually started as something that was a wound within or a loss within my experience of Mormonism that has now turned into something that I am deeply, deeply grateful for. And it is a value moving forward. So
I've created a lot of wounds that have given you opportunities for growth, haven't I? You're just all about growth. Why is Margi so awesome? Because she's married to me. I've caused so many wounds that she's grown phenomenally by being married to me.
Now you're being funny.
It's true.
Anyway, to kind of just build on that too, just my last thought is gratitude isn't glib, it's not shallow, and it's not forced. It is a deep, and I feel like potentially transformative practice, right? When we exercise it, because to go back to what you were saying, I included in mine, this idea that we have all these components and all these parts to ourselves that I think some of those shame parts or those things that things we've experienced that we would disown, bringing them into the light and really integrating them is crucial. And we can do this within the realm, I feel like, of being grateful. And this may feel hard. I just want to put that out there in the beginning. I think it's normal to feel like a reckoning and that anger and that pain and that loss. And I want to say that is fully, like, I acknowledge that, and it is okay if it is to be expected, right? That it's difficult. But just know that as you look at those different experiences and parts of yourself and you start to process those, you will grow in self-awareness. You will become more aware of who you are and also have an acceptance that allows you to grow beyond that fear and loss and anger. And that is important because that's how you will begin to create a new life. Out of that, a seed is born.
I love it. And you can simultaneously feel anger, but you can also, and you can recognize all the problems and all the bad things that had happened to you. In other words, being grateful isn't mutually exclusive with also seeing the problems and even feeling feelings of anger.
That's right. You can do it at the same time.
Or at least have parallel processes. You can have a process of gratitude, but also a process of anger or of criticism or of frustration. Those don't have to be mutually exclusive. We are capable of having multiple processes as humans and feeling different emotions or even conflicting emotions.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of each of our best case for why we feel like it's important to make peace with Mormonism, and why we think it's healthy. A couple comments from our listeners. Angela writes, "Anger is exhausting." That's true, Angela. Anger can be exhausting. And it's also unavoidable. And the more you try to suppress and avoid your anger, the more you limit your ability to process it and move beyond it. So it is exhausting, it is enraging, and it's a super important tool that this podcast is not seeking to minimize, right?
True. And we're not suggesting you pitch a tent and live there either. We want like fluidity, right? The idea is just kind of allowing things to flow.
And that leads it. Rachel's asking an important question. Hey, Rachel. So Angela, thanks for sharing. Rachel's also sharing, she has a question. Natasha, I'm going to throw it to you. What is a healthy amount of time to stay angry? That's a great question from Rachel.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I wish I could say, so 2 days, 40 hours, and 5 minutes, and put your timer on and make sure you keep it to that.
Not a minute more.
So yeah, not a minute more. I think that anger is part of the grief cycle. And the cycle is true. It's not linear. So it's not, I wish, again, it was a checkbox like, oh, I'm done with my anger phase, check it off. And coming from Mormonism, we like to check off things. So anger doesn't really work that way. It's more of a cyclical thing that you may have to revisit over time. I think from a diagnostic perspective, I put faith transitions more in a bereavement category. It's a grief work. And so anytime that you're dealing with symptoms that may last 6 months or longer, as far as like my therapist self-diagnosing somebody with maybe something that would be expected to hopefully be somewhat resolved to get back to normal in your life within 6 months. If you're having problems post that, you may want to, seek out some more like professional help to help you overcome things like that. So, But again, it's not to say that after 6 months, you're never going to be angry again. Right. And it can be triggered by certain, like, oh, all of a sudden I was fine, but then a baptism came up and now I'm angry again, or something happened in the news, right, that reminded me of something that
General conference just happened, right?
Right. Things like that. So it's a feeling we'll probably revisit. I do have just a little trick that for some people can work. Instead of trying to push it aside, sometimes I do actually give a timer idea where it's like, you know what, for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to put on a timer and I'm going to give myself permission to be like ragey angry in a way that's really helpful to me, whether I journal or whether I punch a pillow or whether I whatever. And then when the timer goes off, I'm going to, say, okay, it's almost like a ritual that you create for yourself. And it's like, okay, I gave myself the permission and the time to feel the anger and to maybe have a good cry or whatever I decide to do. And now I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go wash my face and start something anew.
Love it.
I love that idea. Yeah, I love the idea of providing some type of structure to hold it and to allow for it to kind of show up. I also think, too, something that's been helpful at times is to realize it's a secondary emotion, and something that helps sometimes is to ask yourself or to, someone you love about the pain beneath it. Mm-hmm. What is going on beneath the anger? And sometimes that can help kind of loosen the process a little bit and get you tapped into the vulnerability or those deeper things that are going on inside you that can help, I find, sometimes process or shift things in a different way, because anger does have an energy to it. Yeah. And I think it helps sometimes to drop down a bit. Yeah.
And it's usually either fear or sadness that are under or that are under the anger.
Yeah.
But we need to do a full episode on dealing with anger and grieving. Mm-hmm. So let's leave some of that for that episode. But this is great stuff. Lee writes, I'm trying to let go of the idea of turning it off and feeling all emotions instead. That's great feedback. We need to feel our feelings. That was the message from Inside Out. When we try and suppress and oppress our feelings, it leads to bad things. So thank you, Lee. And thanks to you guys. We will, and also, I should say, thanks so much to Rachel asking the question about being angry. We will do an episode on dealing with anger and grieving. Is that cool?
Yep.
Natasha?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's jump to going around. Let's practice it. And what I want to do, I want to ask listeners, right now, there's 38 people online watching. I want to ask you guys to type into the Facebook box, the little chat box, things you're grateful for with Mormonism. Grateful things. And we're going to do a global exercise in gratitude right now. If you're listening after this has been recorded, I want you to go to the post for the podcast. So go to mormonfaithcrisis.com/episode1, whatever it is, find it, and go into the comments and just share the things you're grateful for. And in that way, we can all do kind of a community experience where we're all sharing things we're grateful for. And people 5 years from now can come back and see all the different things we all listed that we're grateful for, and it can help other people process their own gratitude. Does that make sense? And right now, during this live episode, we'll be sharing some of the items that people post as comments on Facebook. Is that okay?
Good idea.
All right, so we're going to begin. We're going to start. Natasha, Margi, and I, and our listeners are all going to share things we're grateful about Mormonism. And I'm going to begin. I'll do the first one. I am grateful for community. Many of you know that my parents died. Sorry, my parents didn't die. My parents got divorced.
I love you.
Yeah,
That was so
my parents are not dead yet. My parents got divorced when I was in middle school, and it was really hard on our family. It was not good, and I feel like the church rose up as almost a replacement parent in some ways for the times when my parents weren't able to be parents. I had leaders who cared about me, leaders who loved me. I had friends. I had fun activities to do. And, you know, we weren't this upper class, elite, healthy family. We were, in many ways, a broken, dysfunctional family where everybody was just struggling to survive individually. And so for me, I'm super grateful that throughout my life, Mormonism has served as this community that was always there. Even when we were living in Cache Valley or Seattle with children, we had friends and ward members that cared about our children, cared about us, who were willing to support and provide things for us. And there's just always been a community so that I didn't feel alone and isolated. And I truly value community. So that's going to be my first thing.
Brilliant.
All right, Margi, what's one thing for you?
So my first thing, and I kind of did it on this pretense of like Mormonism brought me, and I talked about this a bit in my Mormon Transitions interview, but it literally brought me 4 additional siblings. So as part of my story, my parents, we lived in the DC area, and it was my brother and I, and my parents ended up joining the church and had 4 other children, 6 years. So there's kind of that break in our family. So, I mean, literally I have Catherine, Elizabeth, Jonathan, and Timothy. And to me,
they wouldn't exist if your parents hadn't joined the church. Probably. Yeah.
And so those people in my life, I can't imagine my life without, as well as I believe it gave my family at that time a focus that was positive.
I love it. And I'll piggyback on that. We can do Me Too's. I'm grateful I found you, Margi. And I said this earlier. I've met you at BYU. I would not have found Margi if it were for Mormonism. So that's true.
Yeah, and as I get started, I would just like to preface this by, it's perfectly okay that things that certain people are grateful for are not things that you're grateful for, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Very personal.
That's right.
Yeah, this is a very personal exercises. There's no wrong or right. Things that happen, like for example, when you brought up the community, I have like a mixed kind of, relationship with that. On the one hand, I never felt like I fit into my Mormon family, my Mormon wards. And then on the other hand, as a military family growing up, it was a structure that was there for us, right? So it's kind of like a yes and type of thing that I'm grateful for, but then also was wounded by. So I just want to just place that it's perfectly okay to say, oh, I'm so glad you're grateful for that and that was your experience. That was not mine, and my list is going to look very different than that.
Absolutely.
So just want to put that out
So
there.
key. Yep.
What's the first item on your list, Natasha?
So mine, it's so funny that when you ask me this question, mine are very kind of perspective and even doctrinal things. So everybody's just going to have to bear with my weird Mormon self as far as what I'm grateful for that I feel like Mormonism offered me as far as perspectives in life. You have to remember that I come from convert families. From a convert family, my mother grew up Catholic with some very kind of rigid ideas around religion. And then I grew up, in the military where I dealt mostly with evangelical Christians that again had very rigid ideas about religion in ways that I didn't resonate with. So for me, the invitation to consider the feminine divine was amazing. It was amazing. And that I recognize that we're not the only religion that has a feminine divine by any means, even though I thought that for many years.
So you mean mother in heaven?
Mother in heaven, the idea that there's a feminine component to God, and these are not necessarily things I necessarily carry literal belief on, like I believe in this white mother in heaven, like a white father in heaven, but just the concept of feminine divines, feminine spirituality, feminine ritual in conjunction with male spirituality and all of that, especially looking at historicity of religion in general, has been very empowering to me. And I carry that with me in more abstract and symbolic ways now, but that still carry much meaning and have been very empowering for me.
Love it. All right. Thank you, Natasha. I love that idea too. Okay, I'll go next, and I'm going to piggyback. Ruth writes, never have gotten drunk, and so she's never drunk dialed anyone and has never had to throw up from being drunk. And I think she's
very real.
Maybe kind of kidding, but also kind of serious. But thank you, Ruth, for sharing. And that piggybacks on one of mine, which is a set of standards or morals. Now, I'll admit that my standards and morals are somewhat different now. I used to judge the world by the Mormon word of wisdom or the Mormon law of chastity. And I no longer judge the world that way. And I no longer have the exact same moral standards that I did when I was Orthodox Mormon. Having said that, I am glad that as a youth and as a teenager and even as an adult, I had some standards that were given to me, because I think standards matter. And I call them values now. And I look at them very differently. But I think I'm glad I never got addicted to alcohol or drugs. I'm glad that I never contracted an STI personally, or that I never had an unwanted pregnancy. I'm glad that I learned to serve others and try and be honest in all my dealings. And I'm just saying there are all sorts of problems with the way Mormons do morality, but I'm still glad that I inherited a set of standards and values to guide my life until I could upgrade to a better set.
Yep.
So that's my next one. And thanks to Ruth for sharing that idea. Okay, Margi, what's next?
So for me, Mormonism brought me to BYU. So at the time in high school, I was thinking about a few different universities and had gone on some trips for running recruiting trips. And there, without a doubt, I would not have gone to BYU without Mormonism. And if I had not gone to BYU, I would not have met you for sure. So right back at you.
All right.
Number 2 is Mormonism brought me to BYU. I ran for BYU. I got to meet you.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. Hey, I just noticed Mindy Gledhill has joined us, and I can't help but make a shout out to Mindy and tell everybody that Mindy's got a fantastic new album coming out called Rabbit Hole, I believe, or at least that's the first single. And everybody should check out Mindy Gledhill's website and the song Rabbit Hole, and support her on her release of her new album and her new song. So I hope Mindy heard that, but had to make that shout out. Thanks for joining us, Mindy. We love you. MindyGledhill.com. Okay, Natasha, what's next for you?
All right. So again, in a world where I grew up with Eve being a representation of womankind and primarily being seen as this awful creature who, was the downward spiral of all mankind, Mormonism invited me to consider her as an independent agent who used the concept of personal revelation in order to leap beyond what I think is the founding principle of obedience. You know, like that's what the 3-year-olds do, is obey. But when you're 15, you're supposed to do something different. So it went from protection through another in order to seek the more complex principle of knowledge, which is experienced through yourself. And that has resulted in great comfort that innocence is not a desired state. Now, I know culturally we suck at this, but I have found great, profound value in seeing my possibility to have a relationship with the divine on my own, that I have the right to personal revelation, that when I seek knowledge and truth, that is not contrary to the plan, and that sin and all the things that I was made to feel so ashamed of and guilt-ridden were actually part and meant to be part of my journey of an experience as a human being growing into some, potential thing that will never stop growing. Mm-hmm. Again, I have no idea how literal any of these beliefs are for me, but they offer great, beautiful, symbolic, abstract meaning to me in my life.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I can so see that.
Let's add a couple comments. Ruth writes, I love the Mormon concept of Eve. Eve writes, she is a badass in my Mormon view. Yeah, it's true. Eve, in other religious traditions, Eve, it was bad that she tempted Adam, and she's considered, that's kind of original sin. And that's actually a cool doctrinal innovation that Joseph Smith introduced, that it was actually an act of courage and of strength for Eve to partake of the tree of knowledge, the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And that's cool.
And it's so much about what transition work is about, right? Because we're seeking and we're questioning and we're wanting to know things. And it's just for me, it's beautiful that that's a path of goodness and meant to be path.
Sherry writes, Mindy Gledhill's music is awesome. So Sherry's agreeing that Mindy Gledhill is awesome. I think we all agree with that. Angela says, I agree with community. I loved having the friends I had in primary and young women's. Also, I think I'm much more open-minded now than I would have been without having grown up in the church in such a closed-minded theology. So she's learned to be more open-minded, sometimes by the closed-mindedness of the church, and that's fine. That's a great thing. Ruth also loves the idea of a Heavenly Mother. And Allison writes, I am grateful for the community, the introduction and basis for me to find a religion that is best for my family. Also, the young women's values she grew up with, and introducing her to her husband, Arthur, who we also love and know very well. Thank you for that, Allison. Okay, who's next? Am I next?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, I'm going to say identity. That's tricky because I think not only do I no longer identify as necessarily an Orthodox Mormon, but Russell M. Nelson recently has said that Satan rejoices when Mormons refer to each other as Mormons. So I know the term of the Mormon identity is complicated in 2018, but as a youth, well, number one, as a psychologist, as a mental health professional, I believe identity is a crucial component to health and well-being. And even though my identity has changed, having some identity growing up, and I grew up as a Mormon kid in Texas where everybody else was evangelical or, Christian, or a lot of people were, I felt a sense of strength and fortitude by having an identity and something that I was proud of, where I knew who I am, I knew what I stood for, and I knew what I wanted to be. So identity was important.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I had it. Any thoughts there?
That. Support for you.
All right.
We can validate that.
Thank you. I sense you never really fully grabbed the Mormon identity. Is that true, Margi?
I think that's difficult to parse apart. I would probably say I took parts of the identity that I valued.
Right. But you never fully submitted to the identity. You had it.
Probably not.
Yeah. How about you, Natasha?
I felt like the adopted child. I wanted the identity desperately and yet never felt quite accepted. So I wanted to be Mormon and everything that came along with that, but always second guessed myself because I didn't have the typical Mormon upbringing.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the idea that we all don't have to be grateful for the same things, right?
Yeah.
Letty writes, identity, Mormonism taught me that I will one day blossom as a rose and that one day I will be white and beautiful because she's a Lamanite. Oh my gosh. So Letty is sharing that identity for her was a complex thing as somebody who is a person of color and as a Native American or a Hispanic person, whatever your identity is or your nationality or ethnicity. Letty's talking about some of the darker things around Mormonism, and we validate and honor that, Letty. Thank you for sharing. Okay, Margie, what's next?
So for this gratitude, kind of process, I'm looking at my life now. And one thing I have in my life now that I really, really treasure that goes back to my decision to attend to BYU is I still have a friend that I made my freshman year at BYU. And that is something for me right now. So we are good friends. We've known each other for 30 years now, gone through, births, deaths, jobs, moves, faith transitions. And that's something that I deeply value. I deeply value the fact that my Mormonism brought me a relationship with someone that's that dear to me.
I love it. She's great. That's Kate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kate. Shout out to Kate.
Shout out to Kate.
Kate's awesome. All right, Natasha, you're next.
All right. My number 3 is, again, coming from some of my Catholic family members and things of that nature, the invitation to consider the idea that there was something more than just heaven or hell with no ramifications, nothing, like these babies that didn't get baptized and so therefore they were in hell because they died unbaptized. There was something very, very healing and wonderful to consider eternal progression outside of the typical heaven-hell paradigm. And it opened up these possibilities that are never ending, including, even deity being able to progress. For me, it was very helpful to think of an afterlife, not sitting around on a cloud, strumming a harp the rest of my life or eternity. It's like, there's still room for growth. This is just one part of our eternal journey. This helped me adapt to physical evolution ideas in biology and science, which I studied, to spiritual evolution. And again, even though I'm not literal in those beliefs, they cause a lot of just meaning and value to this idea of we can always be learning, always progressing, always shifting and changing. And I see that as a beautiful thing that Mormonism at least introduced to me. Again, I'm not saying that that's unique to Mormonism.
I love it. Very, very good. I'll piggyback on that. I am going to say Mormonism taught me a love for truth. My favorite hymn in Mormonism was, "Oh, say what is truth? 'Tis the fairest gem that the riches of men can produce. And priceless the value of truth will be when the proud monarch's costliest diadem is counted but not and refused." In other words, I believed, the values that I learned in Mormonism about truth and courage and integrity were what fueled me to learn more about it and to, become an activist and to care about social justice and people of color and women and sexual minorities, LGBT people, etc. And I just, those values of compassion and love and honor and integrity and honesty are very much at the core of who I am. And I have to admit, I learned those from the church. And so, yeah, my love for truth and social justice, I got to give some credit to Mormonism for teaching me that.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Margie.
So my 4th kind of gratitude on my gratitude list would be born out of a wound of sorts. And that would be my current sense of empowerment. So this is an example of something that we can reckon with amidst transitioning. And one thing I reckoned with was this idea of how I had turned over certain decisions or parts of my life for someone else to kind of decide or tell me how to live. And I did reckon with that for a time, and now it has turned into something I'm really grateful for. I'm really grateful in this moment that I will never hand over the reins to my own life again. That's just something that is a very strong value of mine currently. I am the captain of my soul. I take responsibility for my own development and growth, and I happily do that. I am thrilled beyond all measure to do that in my own life. And when I need help, I seek people I trust. I go to sources I choose. And I'm just thrilled to death to be on a journey with my own growth and experiences where I'm constantly reflecting and I think listening to my own voice, paying attention, and trying new things and seeing how it works, and having it be less about perfection and more about this idea of testing out and seeing how things work for me and what I like and what feels, like growth and evolution for me. So
I think that's so wise, because no matter what tradition you're raised in, you can be raised Scientologist, Jehovah's Witness, Catholic, atheist, agnostic.
mm-hmm.
You very well could learn to outsource your sense of moral authority to someone else. And so in that sense, Mormonism helped you learn to never do that again. And that's a universal lesson that we all need. It's so important. I think that is the lesson of the faith crisis, is never give away your power and your authority again to anyone, that the kingdom of God is within you. I love it. All right, Natasha.
Is it my turn or yours? Are we on number 4?
It's yours.
Okay. So my fourth idea that I came up with was this idea that we have in Mormonism that's very family-centric. So that obviously, brought a lot of importance to my family relationships and, how I saw myself in all the different roles within my family. But it really, I think, tapped into my sense of social justice, because I think it was kind of the larger picture, right? So that you saw deity organized in a very similar way that you saw your own family structure, so that we are all children of God, right? That God cares about all of us, and whether we live, in New Zealand or Kansas or Africa or Europe or whatever, like we're all connected. Very much from a very early age, tapped into this empathy I had for other people's, other cultures, the pain and suffering that other people were going through. And so it really helped me tap into that. And then also kind of with your idea of authority, I do believe that the ultimate invitation in Mormonism is to become a peer of the divine. So it's not, I mean, that's kind of why a lot of people thought we were blasphemous back in the day, right? And so it's kind of this idea of, again, with that eternal progression and an invitation to grow. So the family system, I have a very different relationship with my mother now as an adult daughter than I did when I was 10 or 12, right? And so to see myself progressing kind of in a bigger way spiritually, that was similar to a family structure, was very interesting. Plus, it also helped me deal with great wounds within my family. I mean, we had a very loving, dysfunctional family where there were, so there was a lot of complication with people who were very righteous and yet very non-righteous, right? So people who were doing things that were wonderful for our same, right? So, and interplay between and what that means.
Natasha, you're breaking up a bit, so we lost those last few words. Do you mind trying it again or repeating them?
You hear me?
Yeah, just those last
Okay, so just the idea that the personal small unit that looks like for you has implications for your space in a family of the world, and then also what it means just in a universe as well.
Love it. Let's check in with our listeners. Christopher writes, I too have a best friend that was the first person I met at BYU. We feel like brothers and have followed similar life paths, including leaving the church. And that's no small thing, Christopher, to find a best friend. No matter where you are, it's hard to find a best friend. And so I think it's great that he's acknowledging that. And that's piggybacking you talking about Kate. Jamie writes, I appreciate exploring the spiritual side of life for discussions on the basic principles of bearing one another's burdens, being strengthened through trials. She loved testimony meetings. She loved discussions on the purpose and meaning of life, and the value of character and integrity. So Jamie's got a big old list. Thank you, Jamie. You deserve a silver gold star for all the cool things you mentioned, and that's true for everybody. Angela writes she forgot cookbooks. So Angela got a lot of cookbooks for Mormonism.
So true.
Amelia writes, I always appreciated the community she had with Mormonism. Some aspects made life harder, but she was grateful that she had a group of friends and leaders that she felt like she belonged to. Teresa and Mindy really liked, Margi, how you expressed what you expressed.
Oh,
So again, shout out to Teresa and Mindy.
thanks for that.
And KJC writes, I am thankful for the word of wisdom and the law of chastity. Having somewhat of an obsessive compulsive personality, I'm glad I was introduced to the church at an early age. I think I could have gotten into some difficult positions otherwise. I'm glad you're discussing this. As I'm in the midst of my faith transition, I have the tendency to only look at the things I'm angry about. Thank you, KJC. And that kind of shadows some of the things I was trying to say. Sherry writes, love the quote, I am the captain of my soul from Invictus.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margi, for reminding me of that. All right, we're loving the comments. We're getting great comments from our listeners. All right, it's time for my fifth and final point is Mormonism gave me a sense of meaning and purpose in my life. And I realized that in addition to owning your own power, which we just talked about, probably the most important advice I could ever give someone in a faith crisis is to find a new sense of mission and purpose. And even though now my purpose and mission isn't to spread Mormonism, to convert all my friends and family, to arrive in the celestial kingdom with my eternal family and to obey whatever the church tells me to do, that's no longer my mission and purpose. But I did learn that it's important to have a sense of mission and purpose. And I learned that from Mormonism. And so now I've converted that. Now my sense of mission and purpose is to promote healing and growth and to alleviate suffering in the world. And the particular way I'm doing that right now is through my work with transitioning Mormons who are in faith crisis. But it excites me every day. I wake up every day excited for my job. I have a job that I love. I get paid for a job that I love. And I have people telling me all the time I've been able to help them positively. And that it makes me excited to live every day. And I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world. And I think everybody deserves to feel like the luckiest person in the world. And I think you get that when you figure out your life's mission and your life's purpose and your life's passion, and you start living towards that. And so I'm just grateful for the Mormonism for teaching me the importance of having a sense of mission and purpose.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, what's your last one, Margi?
So my last one is Mormonism brought me, and then I wrote here to this space with all of you. And that sounds sort of cheesy.
I love
probably.
it. It's not cheesy. It's beautiful.
But I like this
it's
idea.
True.
But I do like this idea, right? That we have those experiences that in the time when you're grappling or reckoning with them, it can feel like a weight. It can feel like a burden. And there is something to that transition or that shift where all of a sudden you realize it's a gift. It's become this gift. And now I have this connection to all of you. I have had this experience and things that, I find oftentimes the things that have touched me or hurt me or inspired me are the things that I feel most connected to others about. And so it gives this wonderful space where we're connecting right now. And that has been a tremendous, tremendous gift to me in my life.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you. Natasha, what's your last one? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that's very profound, actually, for us to recognize that wherever we are is a big part of where we come from, even the hard parts. So I think that's really good.
Thank you.
All right, so my last one is a weird one, I guess, because if anybody's listened to my, interview with John on Mormon Stories, I suffered greatly through sexual shaming, in our church. And yet at some level, I guess the other side of that coin for me is that I do believe Mormonism was the first place where I was invited to consider sex positivity. And there's some significant ways that happened. First was with my relationship with my body. This idea that in a world where I did not fit the typical, size that I was supposed to look, or I wasn't, whatever I thought I should be, blonde, straight hair, tiny figure. I was none of those things growing up. So feeling a lot of body shame, even in my adolescence years, Mormonism was one of the places where, I was able to learn that my body was a gift and that it was acceptable and lovely and beautiful and something I could take care of and feel ownership about. So those kinds of ideas were very helpful for me. As I've, reframed some of my sexual shame from Mormonism, I really do think that there's something very profound that you can find there that is much more than procreation. We do have a lot of room in Mormonism for sexuality to be intensely spiritual bonding experience. And not that every sexual experience has to be those things, but the potential for something kind of out of this world in our sexual sphere, I think was introduced to me through a Mormon perspective. And even the idea of being created in a way that I can find pleasure within my own body, that I'm not dependent on another person. I know it's not what we teach and preach over the pulpit, but again, these things kind of came from these ideas of created a certain way where I can touch myself, pleasure myself, have the capacity for self-pleasure that then I can actually share with another person of my choosing. So it's a mixed bag for me, but I feel like Mormonism complicated sexuality for me, shamed me, and also offered me some positive things that make my world today very meaningful as far as how I think about sexuality.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love positive sexual messages. And I'm so glad Mormonism created you, Natasha, because you've helped us all
Can I say?
have healthier relationships with sexuality. And I'm grateful that Mormonism helped create you.
Aw, I feel that way about you guys too.
Together. Yeah.
That's right.
A couple more awesome comments from our listeners.
That's right, dear friend.
What's that?
No, awesome relationships that we have with each other, with so many people. Yes.
Okay, a couple other awesome comments from our listeners. We're so grateful for the wonderful comments we've had so far. Amelia writes, I am honestly grateful to have had the opportunity to go through a faith crisis resulting in a paradigm shift. It has given me a very unique perspective that I would not have otherwise, as hard as it was. Amelia, that's brilliant. I remember one wise person once saying they had the blessing of being profoundly wrong about something, and that you learn a lot from being profoundly wrong about something. And that can be a huge gift. It can teach you humility. It can teach you compassion. And I think that's a really cool, I got that from John Larson, who used to have a podcast called Mormon Expression. But that's a cool thing. So thanks, Amelia. KJC writes, yes, John, that's so true. I felt such a sense of purpose in my life. That has been a hard thing for me now that I no longer believe. I have to direct my purpose myself. Time to grow up, I guess. Yes, KJC. Time for all of us to grow up. And thank you for writing in. We really appreciate that comment and your vulnerability. That's awesome. Andrea writes, recently I've been finding a deeper meaning of peace and respect, showing that example to friends and family. So for her, she's learning more peace and respect. Andrea writes, rather than having a chip on my shoulder about church and showing them that we can be happy. Yes, that is very important. Letty also writes, road shows taught me to sing and dance. She says, enjoy life, it's a carnival. And then Ruth is piggybacking what you said, Natasha, the healthy and unhealthy ways that the church teaches members about sexuality has been a really important thing of learning for hers. All right, well, we have completed the substance of this episode 1 of The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis. Great job, Margi.
Nice job, John. Nice job, Natasha.
Good job, Natasha.
Good job.
Not that we need it, because we're so internal.
We are pack animals to the core.
We're just all reassuring each other. You're great. I'm great. Are you great?
That was a great
Am
idea.
I great? Are you great? You're great. Are we great? We want to, so I want to thank you, Margi, you, Natasha, for being on this episode. I'm really excited to do this with you. I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in and making wonderful comments and perspective.
We can end with the idea of how they can do this practice too.
Yeah. Oh,
which would be brilliant.
go ahead. So why don't you?
Well, I said it in the beginning, but the idea that if you like the idea of this and if you've loved this kind of got you thinking, feel free. You could do a writing practice on your own and try and maybe jot down some things that you want to pack in your suitcase for, from now on, or things that you're really grateful for. Or if you have a person in your life that you think this conversation could be enriching and, really a lovely thing to have, you can grab a person and have a conversation about the things that Mormonism has brought to you in your life. So just a couple ideas there. And remember, like part of this conversation, what was so lovely about it was hearing all the differences, right? The idea that how unique people's perspectives are.
Yeah, so you just introduced we're going to add this segment to all our future episodes. Every segment's going to end with homework. And this is homework that we want to challenge our listeners to do to get better, because you're not going to get better just by listening to a podcast.
You must be a coach or something.
I know. We're going to get better by acting on the things that we learned today. And so you're suggesting for homework that people blog or journal about things they're grateful for. Is that right? Talk to someone if you want to about all the things if you have a significant other, a parent, a sibling, a friend, pull someone over to talk to about what you're grateful about. You can blog about it. And I would say go to MormonFaithCrisis.com, go to this episode, and share in the comments the things you're grateful for. And over time, that'll stand as a history and as a record for a bunch of people in our community that have shared what they're grateful for. So in whatever way you can and want to, go through this week a gratitude exercise. And if you want to share with us, email us at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com and let us know, whether that was positive for you and what positive things came out of that homework of gratitude. Good idea, Margi.
One way that I might recommend, so if you get a journal and you kind of start in the middle, and on one side you put gratitude and on the other side you put wounds or whatever you think, you can write kind of both types of things. Sometimes it's easier to come up with what we're angry about. Sometimes not though. And sometimes people have a hard time tapping into their anger. So what I like to do with people is see if their lists are like way imbalanced. Like is one list, super long and the other one is not as long. Plus also as kind of like I did wounds and things I was gratitude.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great. And Natasha, you may be breaking up a little bit. So if I cut you off, it's just because you broke up for a second. But that's a great idea.
We love the idea and we love the visual on that. The idea of, and even looking at the wounds and seeing if from the wounds there are things that then become a value moving forward.
That's right.
That you're grateful for the insight about. So great. Yeah.
So having a place in your journal for both positive things, gratitude and frustrations. I love it.
Do you want to talk about events coming up before we take off, or not yet?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Natasha. Is there an event coming up that our listeners should know about?
Well, there's 2 events that I think that they should know about. So December 28th, I will actually be in Salt Lake City area, and we'll be doing a mixed faith evening, just 7 to 10 p.m. So it'll be kind of a short workshop for those in mixed faith marriages. So that's December 28th from 7 to 10 p.m.
Where will that be?
In Sandy.
Okay. So we'll have to, a mixed faith thing, we'll have to get information about that on the website. Okay. What else?
In February 15th.
Wait, you're breaking up, Natasha. Can you start over?
Can you?
No, you're still breaking up.
I think she's referring to ours.
Yeah, but I don't have information about that retreat. Go ahead, try it again, Natasha.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, try it again.
I feel like a commercial.
Try it again.
Hear me now.
Try it again.
All right, so February 15th through 17th, we are doing an intensive couple retreat. So Margi and John and I have been doing retreat for years now, where 40 people, 50 people show up, and there's generalized information. But we've gotten requests, actually held a few in my own practice, where just a few couples want intensive work dealing with their issues with a faith transition. So this one that we're going to be doing in February are for couples that are in essence transitioning together. It's in some way or form or another. We will be offering one that's similar in the fall for mixed faith couples, but this will be capped at 6 couples only. So it'll be a much more dive into these types of things and very personalized to your situation. So if you're interested in either one of those events, you can get more information on, I think, on the webpage and also on our individual pages.
So we'll add these events to our events page at mormonfaithcrisis.com/events. And yeah, we would love to fill that intensive couples retreat with 5 or 6 couples who really want to spend a weekend doing intensive work with me, Margi, and Natasha. That'll be super cool.
And that will be held in the Salt Lake City area as well. We don't have a venue yet, but it'll be in the Salt Lake City area.
Yeah, and I'll just add that very soon we'll be announcing events. We'll probably visit Chicago. We'll probably visit another city in Colorado. We're going to be doing some things in Salt Lake. I want to have a mixed faith marriage retreat where it's just like 20 couples all in mixed faith marriages. We want to go back to Europe and do a retreat in Europe. So there are lots of workshops and retreats that we're going to be announcing soon. We want to do something also in the Ogden, Davis County area, and we want to do something in South Jordan, Harriman kind of area, along with Utah County and Provo. So we have lots of cool workshops and retreats coming up. Look for us to be announcing those very soon.
Perfect.
Okay, I want to end with some things listeners can do. So for those of you who've stuck with us, we need your support. We can't do this just in isolation. We need your support to make this podcast continue. And so I'm just going to tell people ways they can support this podcast. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
The first is to like our Facebook page. So just go to the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis Facebook page and like it. The more likes we have, the more people are going to know about it. Why are you laughing?
No.
Okay.
I'm just enjoying.
Okay.
It's all good.
The second thing you can do is donate financially to support this podcast. So if you go to mormonfaithcrisis.com that's it. Up in the top right, there'll be a button where you can donate. And you can pick $10 a month for a bronze level subscriber. I think it's $25 a month for a silver, $100, $50 a month for gold, and $100 a month for platinum. What we would love is have this audience of donors that just basically donate once a month to this podcast. We're giving the podcast away for free. We believe that the stuff we're sharing has value, but we think it'll be able to help more people if we give it away for free. But we need donors and supporters to make that possible. So please consider donating to MormonFaithCrisis.com if you want to see these episodes continue. This is not part of the Open Stories Foundation. This is a private thing that Margi, Natasha, and I are doing. So I'll just make that clear. But we really need your financial support to be able to pay for our time and our efforts. So please donate to the podcast. We would really appreciate that. Please share these episodes with your friends and family and loved ones. Share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram, share it on Twitter, share it in groups, on email, whatever you can. Please let people know about this podcast. Please comment on our page at MormonFaithCrisis.com. We would really appreciate those comments. Please email us at MormonFaithCrisis@gmail.com with any suggestions, feedback, criticisms, compliments, whatever you have. And then if you have needs in your personal life, your marriage, your individual life, please consider us as coaches. Again, you can reach out to Natasha at natashaparker.org. You can reach out to Margi at beautyinthenow.org. And you can reach out to me at johndehlin.com. We make a living by our faith crisis coaching practices, and we want to make sure you reach out to us if you need help. And those are all ways you can support this episode and this project. So without any further ado, thanks so much to our listeners. We want you to know that we've loved your participation. We look forward to doing this once a week. Tune in again next week. We hope it to be around noon or 12:30 every Tuesday morning, Utah time. Sometimes we'll get delayed or there'll be problems, but look for this live episode once a week on Tuesdays. And we hope to we hope to see you guys again soon and to join with you again soon on our next episode of The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis.
Yes. Sounds good to me.
Thanks, Margi.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Love you, Natasha. You're awesome.
Love
Bye,
you guys.
everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, listeners. Appreciate all the support. We'll see you guys soon.